Hey, Stephen here with Coping with COVID. Going to spare the usual introduction and just jump right into it today. I have a very special guest on the show with me today. This man is one of my favorite YouTubers of all time, especially for those of you that like retro gaming, all different sorts of video games, great content. He's even done his own podcasts, his own series. He's done a lot of different Let's Plays, featured many different games of all different genres. Please welcome NecroVMX, aka John, onto the podcast. John, fire away. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi. My name is John. I call myself NecroVMX on the internet. I am a Twitch streamer and YouTube Let's Player, although I've dabbled into a lot of other things on YouTube. Despite video game content, I've also done educational content and movie reviews and podcasts and things like that. But these days, I pretty much just exist on Twitch. I stream every single day for multiple hours and building my little community up slowly over time. Just trying to entertain people. That's the goal.
Absolutely, you do it very well. And one of my favorite things about your channel is that you really emphasize, and I'm so glad, John, that you mentioned that specifically as far as the education piece on your channel, because a lot of your content being, centered around, a lot of it is centered around the video gaming, but you also always speak to promoting factual information.
Oh, yeah.
You speak to people understanding the truth, certainly about, because I remember I was watching some of your Clearing Confusion episodes about different topics, and you always put the facts first, and I think that to me, it's like you're one of the most intelligent voices on YouTube today, and that's especially hard to find, especially on a channel where it's about video gaming, multimedia, and stuff. And so I've always appreciated that.
Yeah,
about you.
It's interesting because it was never the intent. Like I always came off as I was trying to be humorous and make people laugh, and it got actually to be frustrating at a time when I just saw the amount of misinformation out there, and I would try to like clear up these little things here and there, and I do the best I can. I really do. I still do it. It's mostly on the Discord these days where I'm giving my little lectures about video gaming history or development lore and things like that, and I found that people actually do want to hear it half the time, so that's good. Especially lately, my thing has kind of been obscure RPG development lore and talking about, how games that get canceled never really disappear. And that's kind of been my thing. And I do have a video planned on that about a game that you probably never heard of that wound up being, like, I think the most influential RPG ever. So, there'll be a return to that sort of content soon, I think, because I do want to get back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that really gave me the idea to really invite you on the podcast, like I said, you've always put, emphasis on your channel of, what, I'm going to create entertaining content. But I'm also, you do a really good job with, I think that your content attracts very much, an educated audience. That's been my perspective. And certainly I think that's very important these days, especially because there's still so much misinformation out there, especially with COVID-19. I'm always shocked. I'm always shocked. We were talking about that a little bit off air, on how it's just so unbelievable to me how people can have it's been politicized to an unbelievable degree when this is really not political at all.
Well, what isn't?
Well, yeah, that's true.
What isn't? And I read something that said one of the great historical insults of all of humanity was "May you live in interesting times." And boy, are we doing that right now? This is a very, very interesting time, and from the standpoint of just like, imagine reading this in history books years from now. Imagine 20, 30 years, assuming we don't all die of the plague. That we're going to read about this and how it's going to be framed, because history is always like really distorted anyway. And you mentioned the politicization, and I want to mention something. My favorite series of movies ever is Planet of the Apes. And me and a friend were recently watching Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And, you know, spoilers for a movie that's 9 years old, but I mean, there's this plague that wipes out a lot of humanity towards the end of it. And it was interesting watching the film in 2020 in the middle of COVID, seeing how basically the people that were involved did everything wrong, how nobody took the proper safety precautions. No, like the guy that was immediately exposed to the bug wasn't quarantined. He was walking around. He infected somebody else who happened to be an airline pilot who wound up spreading it to an airport. And then from there, it became a pandemic. And we have plans to watch the next film next month, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. What I said, it's interesting is that in that film, there's a character that's like kind of a basic chud that you see on Facebook now, or YouTube comments, or iFunny, or whatever the hell kind of crap app you have that is just like, oh, well, you know, the monkey started this, man. It's the simian flu, you know. And it just, you think about it now, that's like the people saying, oh, well, it's the Chinese. And it's like, what does it matter where it really came from? Like, let's just try to not die. You know what I mean? And this person was told in the movie, like, it's just called simian flu, but the apes didn't purposefully spread it to humans. It was created by people in a lab, and this guy's just like, oh, well, I have my opinions. And I hate to be the one to go down this route, but like, I think that like one of the worst things we ever did from an educational standpoint is try to tell people that opinions are facts. Because now everybody that has an opinion thinks that they can't be told that they're wrong. And I mean, because that's the way it was in school. They were like, all opinions are special, all opinions are valid. And I'm like, no, some opinions are garbage. Most opinions are garbage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you get these people that are like, well, I think it's a hoax. I think it's... you know, like, all right, you think it's a hoax, then go around without a mask. I could say that, but then they're spreading it to people who are more vulnerable, and we're in a position where, you know, idiots are basically at the helm, and they're running the engine, and they're chasing the boat.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was so powerful. I first want to comment to what you said, something so powerful with the, you know, because being a classroom teacher, I take this immensely seriously. And I remember when I was in grade school, there was, I want to say it was fifth grade. I'm just making, I think so. There was literally it was probably fourth or fifth grade. And there was a lesson where they had us identify statements that were facts and identify statements that were opinions. And it's like, now I'm thinking that we need to bring that lesson into middle and high school, and we need to revamp that. And that needs to be a continued standard, because the problem is that this is something that it exists, whether you want it to believe it does or not. And, you know, people are going to, well, it's not happening to me. It doesn't happen to you. It's the same thing I tell people with, you know, my recommendations for online security that I've been given for years is, you know, I use the same password everywhere. I don't care. It doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen to you until it does.
Yeah.
You know, and I was watching another guy's channel, Kerry Holzman, and that's exactly what he said. He said, it doesn't happen to you until it happens to you. And it doesn't happen to you until maybe it happens to someone you know, and then suddenly this becomes real. I mean, how many articles does it take where you see, you know, this person who was a prominent COVID denier is now
dead,
hospitalized, or
dead.
Or dead, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And we're dealing with, I'm going to make the bold claim here. And at first I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to make the bold claim that, well, it's now been, I mean, there's significant evidence showing that we don't have enough evidence to know the long-term implications. So it doesn't really matter if you're going to be somebody that might have a mild or even asymptomatic case of this, because there are long-term implications that we don't know yet from this virus. That's the main difference that differentiates it from a common seasonal flu, is that whether you get it mild or severe, there's been lung imaging that shows people with asymptomatic cases had lung damage, and there's clotting, and there's things that we don't understand yet. And people need to, I think, stop thinking of this as sort of a bad flu-like thing, and almost switch to thinking of it as more of like an HIV type thing, where this could really impact me beyond just the acute infection period. And I think that if people can switch to that mindset, but the problem is a lot of people are still at that denial. Denial is the easiest. Denial is the easiest.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting is you see the people who say, "Oh, well, the flu kills more people every year," and I just want to point out that it hasn't even been a year. So
Yeah.
we don't know how many people could potentially die from this. You know what I mean? And this is not like a we don't know if it's something that's going to come back every year. We don't know if you even get immunity to it. You know what I mean? And I actually, you know what I mean? I think, that there's a chance that I might have already had this thing.
Yep.
And
Same.
and I don't know because it was before it was all in the news. It was something that you were hearing that was happening in China, and now they're kind of saying that yeah, there were cases in the United States in 2019. We just didn't really know about it. And I think about before all this blew up, I had what I would describe as the worst cold ever. You know what I mean? And it went on for like way longer, and I was just like so run down and everything. And I'm thinking, well, that could have just been a really bad cold, or it could have been COVID-19. My mother, who is in her 60s, might have had it. She's somebody who has asthma. She's in like every risk group you can think of. And then I'm
No.
thinking that she might have had it asymptomatically. I was reading a thing where you could have it where there's no respiratory distress and there's no fever. You just get bad diarrhea for like a week.
Yep.
And something
Yep.
like that happened to her. I'm thinking like this is a disease that you don't know how it's going to affect, and it really speaks to the lack of empathy we have as a people when you have, like real heads like Ben Shapiro who are sitting there saying, "Oh well, the people who were going to die from it already had one foot in the grave, and I'm still trying to make up for the fact that I'm only 5'1".
Yeah.
I mean, these people like they have to speak to their audience, and they don't care if what they're saying is true or moral. They have to keep themselves in their own bubble, and I don't think there's any way to change that. There's no way to get through to these people. We just have to hope that there's enough intelligent people to get us through this. The saying that we're all in this together, it's kind of nonsense. We're not really all in this together because there are several saboteurs on board. They love people who are neutral. They love them. I'll tell you,
Right.
people like our world leaders, and I don't just want to point out just Trump because he's just one of many, because there's enough Trump palette clones that run countries throughout the globe that it's practically like Mortal Kombat trilogy.
I love the video. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's so many palette swaps of Trump out there, and he wasn't the first, and he won't be the last person to use that particular leadership style. But they love it when people are like, I don't want to be political, I don't want to be extreme, I want to stay out of it, I don't want to upset people, because it really just means they're running unopposed. And it also means that they could paint the other side, the opposing side, as extremists, which
Right.
is dangerous because when you're saying basic things like everybody should wear masks, and that's painted as an extremist view, what kind of world are we really living in?
Right, because the extremes inform the mean. So when you misrepresent the means as the extreme, I had a math professor who would say that as far as this podcast goes, it's like I'm sorry, but if you can't handle the truth, that it's like I'm sorry, people that, like you said before, lack of empathy and even more so lack of perspective. If you lack the perspective to the degree that you feel the rules don't apply with to you, I can't, I can't deal with wearing a face covering properly for 30 minutes in a store. 90% of that, I'm going to make the bold claim again. I'm going bold on this episode. I'm going bold. 90% of that is the rules don't apply to me mentality. And then 10% might be somebody who actually has some sort of difficulty. But to that, that's what grocery delivery is for.
Yeah,
That's when you use other options.
if you're so immunocompromised or so in respiratory distress that wearing a mask would literally kill you, you shouldn't be going out in the middle of a pandemic at all.
Right. So it's like, I don't know
It's
what
like,
the priority is backwards.
yeah, but yeah, it's kind of interesting what you said about priorities and whatnot, because and rules don't apply to me, because it's interesting because we also have a lot of things going on right now with protests, and it's very easy for these same people who were saying that the law is saying that you should cover up your face or stay 6 feet apart are tyranny, and they're trying to keep us down and don't step on me and please no steppy snake, and you
Yeah.
know they're the same ones who were calling for law and order and saying they can't do that. They can't occupy 3 blocks of San Francisco. They can't be outside saying don't shoot black people. That's illegal. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe, but so is what you're doing. Law is an abstract concept at best.
Right.
So
goes into it, and it's such a crazy time, and there's so many contradictions everywhere. And I'm not trying to, when we started off the get-go, I said, hey, I'm the one trying to not make this political. I mean, what I've always said is, you know what? I'll give an example. I'll be fair. I was in the store the other day and I saw a guy wearing a face covering that said Trump 2020 on it. And you know what?
At least he was wearing it.
Exactly. I was like, you know what? If it was a pandemic, I would have shook his hand, because you know what? At least you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You're acknowledging that, you know what? This is about keeping the community safe. This is a public health emergency. This is a pandemic. It goes beyond the self-centeredness. Everybody is so, it's me, and when you do that, it goes way beyond that. But unfortunately, there's so many things that are beyond our control, and somebody like me who's very health anxious, it's hard to, it's hard to keep the anxiety under control. And one of the things that I recently remembered was how video games have, I haven't done a lot of gaming in a very long time, and it made me think, that could be a coping strategy right there. I'll give an example. Are you aware of something called somatic symptom disorder?
I've heard the phrase, but I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert on it.
Yeah, so it's sort of I guess continuation's an odd word choice, but it's a specific type of health anxiety disorder. It used to be called hypochondriasis.
Okay.
But it's unique in the sense that you actually will get symptoms and sensations. I mean, they tend not to be severe, but they're there enough to really make you think that you're experiencing something. And I was joking on my Facebook story months ago, and I said, you can get a COVID-19 diagnosis without any exposure to SARS-CoV-2. You just through a Zoom call, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you go on Zoom, somebody says, oh, I'm feeling sick, and they cough, and then you're like, you start worrying about it, and then you feel like you have a sore throat, and then at that time the testing was even more a mess than it was now. You couldn't even get the test half the time, so you would just do telemedicine, and then your doctor would say, yeah, you probably have it, stay home. Boom, there's a COVID-19 diagnosis with no SARS, no actual exposure to the virus, purely in the mind. But there's one really powerful strategy that I remember, and I thought of it in an unlikely way. And I'll share this little story right here because I think that it's humorous, and it's going to help people, because everybody is now sort of forced in a way, at least somewhat, to be in the world that people like me with health anxiety have been in for a while now. And this is a really powerful thing that I've realized, is that the brain subconsciously can only focus on so many things. You can get symptoms that are not organic. They're not real, right? They're not real symptoms. And you can get them whether you're consciously or subconsciously worried about a particular disease. But one thing that I've noticed is that when I would be worried about one particular thing, and then I would start worrying about a different particular thing, the symptoms and sensations from that first thing would go away. And an example of that is I was worried about some article I read about doctors in New York said that some young people had a certain type of stroke, even if they had a mild case of COVID-19. So I thought, what if I'm asymptomatic and I just suddenly get a stroke for no reason and die, right? So I was literally getting like neck tension, like almost like a symptoms of meningitis. And
you need someone like me to sit there and you say that, and then I will say, well, what if you get struck by lightning?
Yeah, seriously. But I was literally getting these feelings, and I would get these like surges of panic where I would feel like my jaw was locking, or that my eyelid was drooping, which is like a stroke symptom, but then there was nothing there. But then the next day I went in for some medical tests unrelated to COVID-19, and all those went away, because then I was just worried about my test result. And so I realized that, hey, this is just my mind playing tricks on me. But that experience of having one type of or one subject of anxiety completely take away the other type of anxiety led me to video games, which I know is going to sound weird, but you'll understand what I'm talking
Well,
about in a
because
second.
you have something to focus on.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just something to focus on, because even when I'm focused on something, I can still get sensations. But it led me to Doom 3.
Okay.
It led me to Doom 3 because no matter how many times, this is one of my favorite games. Some people don't. Some people tend to either love it or hate it. It's one of my personal favorite games. I love all the Dooms, but what's unique about Doom 3 is no matter how many times I play it, I'm always going to get out of my seat. You can't remember every time something jumps out. It is so atmospheric that you literally, your brain doesn't have room to work with in the subconscious or the conscious mind. It's like, well, what next symptom am I going to get? There's no time to think about it because, oh no, an archvile just spawned.
See, I think that like what you're getting at is that it is giving your brain not something to focus on, but a lot of things to focus on because you're immersed. And
totally
immersion is, I mean, for me, it wouldn't be Doom 3. It would be something maybe a little bit more along the lines of Skyrim, where I forget that I'm even playing a game. But you know, because that's what happens is that you immerse yourself into it, and it's not always the thing that I want. Sometimes I want to feel like I'm just playing a game, you know, and sometimes I'm, you know, want to feel like I am. Now it's sort of an interesting thing because if I'm playing a game, if I'm holding a controller in my hand, I'm talking into a microphone. I'm looking at a chat or maybe I'm recording for YouTube. So I'm kind of like never really fully focused on the game. And people are kind of surprised to feel that like outside of YouTube and Twitch, I don't game all that much, if at all, you know, because it's like my job. And it's sort of like if your job is painting, you're not going to go home and paint for fun, right?
Right.
But yeah, it is true that like I have pretty severe anxiety myself, and unless something's going wrong with the stream, I'm never feeling that anxiety when I'm streaming. It takes it away because there's like 50 things to focus on. I have to worry about what I'm doing, what I'm saying, and who I'm talking to, and what I'm saying to that person. Did I miss anything? And am I being entertaining? It's sort of like you're not losing anxiety. You're just putting your anxiety into something else because you're still worried. It's just you're not worried about your health. You're worried about what's going to pop out of a door and shove a fireball up your ass.
Right, exactly, right. I see that you have a lot of different things going on with Twitch and like you said, when you're gaming enough can be very effective as a coping strategy for many different things. But with what you're doing and you know, Twitch streaming and interacting with people simultaneously, that adds an even additional layer. How would you say, if at all, with everything going on, how has that affected, either positively or negatively or just neutral matter of fact, how has that affected your channel on YouTube, your streaming on Twitch, your daily life?
For YouTube, almost not at all, because I'm still uploading stuff from last year. I record everything well in advance, but there have been a few times where I had this weird thought where I had this bad allergy attack. I have a bad allergy to dust. And I had been cleaning out the basement and I was coughing up a storm. And it was like COVID had like just started getting really bad here. And I'm like trying not to cough, you know. And I'm like, oh my God, people are going to think I have it, you know. But then I'm like, well, maybe by the time this video goes up, it'll all be over. Now I'm thinking, yeah, probably not. As for Twitch, it actually it affected the channel in a way that like I really didn't anticipate, in that it affected the conversation. And I think that we have deeper conversations because everybody's got their own anxiety and their own fears and everything. And you know, usually when I'm sitting there playing, you know, like Mortal Kombat or something, I would prefer the discourse in the chat to be somewhat related to Mortal Kombat. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But these days, like today, I did a Mortal Kombat stream, and this didn't necessarily happen today, but I could have somebody come in and say, oh my God, my relative got an exposure to COVID, is having a test. And then we all sort of like as a community kind of come together and reassure this person. And you know what I mean? We basically like have formed a really tight knit community. And I think that like you know, even like we get random people that come in and one or two things happen. They sort of like hang out for a little while and maybe they come to one or two more streams and then you never see them again, or they just become a core part of everything. And I think that like you know, it's actually kind of cool because people are, you know, everybody's sort of like trying out streaming right now too, because everybody's so, you know, bored and locked up and it's something you can do. But I think they're all discovering that it's not at all easy. It's stressful as but yeah, I you know, like we have a whole net, like you're on my Discord, you've been on there for like what, a day or two, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of people on there and we have like a whole network of people, like a lot of people on there are streamers. And you know, and it's interesting because like a lot of things, I actually started the streams as a way to sort of promote something, and that something is not relevant anymore. So now it's just, all right, it's just because this is what I do now and I'm making a little bit of money here and there. But yeah, it's incredibly community based, and I think that it's changed it in the sense that I think that we have a sense of closeness, which is a positive change. You know what I mean? Everybody's sort of like looking out for one another, and there's always a silver lining. You know, there's always something good. You can name any horrible thing that's happened, and I can tell you something good that came out of it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Even if it's just that we learned that something is a really terrible idea. You know, sometimes that's what comes out of it. But yeah, I think that like, yeah, that's basically what's affected it, is the attitudes of the people in the chat, because a lot of people are coming to the stream specifically to cope. They're coming there specifically because it's something that happens every day and it's a calming thing. And it's something that they can engage with and feel like almost like they're, you know, part of a family almost. And they become protective of it and they become a big part of it. And I think that wouldn't have happened under normal circumstances.
Right. So it's almost like, dare I say, it's like the silver, if you can find silver lining of COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, this is what it is. There's
Absolutely.
And this is no content, like it's not, it's, you're at home anyway.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So it's just an extension of what you were doing, and you've sort of created an even greater community that's gone so far beyond just video gaming. It's more about the actual community, and I think that's so powerful. And one of the things, John, that I've always really respected about you is that, and I want to say you said this, I don't know if it was maybe, I can't remember what it was, what I was listening to, is one of the different things that you posted, and you were saying that, you know, like, you know what, you're like, my views on YouTube are much lower than they have been in the past, and I'm okay with that. You said I'm okay with that as long as if I can get 100 people that watch it that actually are getting something from this, absorbing the content. That's what you would rather have. I think we're going to end it here this time. For everybody listening, I appreciate it, especially if you've made it through the whole thing. John, I will say goodbye to you proper. For everybody else, thank you for listening to Coping with COVID. Take care.